I'm not somehow able to comprehend that consciousness does not require subtract. Is there any proof or experience one can get this? Yeah, you're right. I'm just going to talk about this archiming, whatever your name may be. I'm just going to talk about this in a personal story to make it easier to understand. I've told this story many a time, but for those that this is the first time, then you can hear it fresh. For those that have heard it before, then you can, listen again. Well, absolutely pointless me saying that, but hey ho. So basically, this is a very interesting question. So what we got is in every moment there's always experiencing. No matter what, there is always experiencing happening. And experiencing isn't separate from the objects. So there is no experiencing inside the body. There is experiencing that's happening, and there's no separation. You can't, when you begin to examine the experience, you can't find a difference between an object and the consciousness of the object. At first you think it comes from in the head or behind the head, but the more you explore, the more you see that consciousness and every object are the same. And then you sort of see that all objects and sensory perception are the same, because you only know an object through looking, hearing, smelling, taste, or feeling, or thinking about it. So then you sort of see that, in a way, objects are sensing as well, and consciousness. What happened to me when I was in India many, many moons ago was that I was still in the waking up process, and I was laying in bed, and I don't know what happened, if I fell asleep or I was awake or what happened, but I was laying on bed, and then there was awakeness, there was consciousness, and there was no objects at all. There was nothing to be aware of. There was just awakeness, and it was no color, it was no feeling, no sensation. There was no idea that was happening. There was no sense of boredom. I couldn't think, oh, I'm being conscious. That could have gone on for infinity. It could have been endless amount of time, and there was no perception of time. There was just awake presence happening, and it was totally content. It was even beyond contentment. It had no sense of discontentment. Then eventually, at some point, after what could have been infinite amount of time, which it was in a way, a thought popped up and said, this is what they talk of. And then another thought said, if this is what they talk of, who am I that they talk to? Because I had no sense of self either. And then an image of Lisa arose, and a whole life arose. And then the sounds of the outside world began to arise. And then the colours of the world and objects in the world began to arise. And that was a really important awakening. There was still suffering over that and identifying after that, and there was still identifying happening. But then after that moment, I knew so deeply that the essence was awakeness, not things. Now, in a way, that was an experience, because we don't know consciousness is without things. Like, I knew that consciousness that had been revealed to me was the basis of everything. That came first. But in a way, in our experience, the consciousness and the things rise at the same thing. Existence arises. So I knew after that non-existence that I'd experienced, or that no thing, that awakeness of nothing, was also happening when there were things, when there was things appearing. But in a way it was an experience, because the actual experience is there's always things, or there's always something happening. Whether that's for someone or not for someone, that's irrelevant, but it's like what we know is there is existence, and there is perception of existence, and that's what always is. We don't know deep sleep, or we don't know awakeness with out things. Like, in a way that was an experience, because I can remember it. So it's something that's happening in things. If I had that experience again, I wouldn't remember the awakening experience from before. So we don't know deep sleep. We don't know non-existence. Non-existence doesn't exist. So we only know existence. And in existence, there is this perception that's happening. And when you go deeply into that perception isn't separate from things. So the only conclusion that we can have is that things are conscious, that everything is conscious, and that consciousness is nothing. And it's totally freaking mysterious. And there's also this sense of existence, this sense that it's happening. That's the love side. So thank you for your question. I'm sure that finished you off and pushed you over the cliff and you woke up in that moment.